to biology class. My name is Efere. The topic before us is regulation of the internal environment. This is the sixth part where we shall continue our lesson on endocrine gland. This topic is found in the theme Organism at Work. By the end of today's lesson, you should be able to explain the functions of pancreatic hormones, the functions of adrenal hormones, and the functions of the hormones of the reproductive organ. You should also be able to state the effects of oversecretion or undersecretion of these hormones. Let's begin. In our previous lesson, that's the fifth part of this topic, where we began our discussion on endocrine glands. We said so many things about endocrine glands, hormones, endocrine system, and some group of endocrine glands. Can you remember them? What are endocrine glands? We said endocrine glands are glands that release their secretion directly into the blood. So they are called ductless glands. They are different from exocrine glands. We said endocrine glands secrete substances that are generally regarded as hormones. What then is hormone? Hormones are chemical substances, or we can call them chemical messengers, that are secreted by endocrine glands, and they stimulate certain cells and tissues of the body into action. We say they stimulate their target organs into action. We looked at different categories of hormones. We said hormones are categorized based on the glands that secrete them. We looked at some categories which include the pituitary hormones, thyroid hormones, parathyroid hormones, pancreatic hormones, adrenal hormones, and hormones of the reproductive organs, which are hormones secreted by the endocrine gland of the testes or endocrine gland of the ovaries in male and females respectively. In that same lesson, we learned about the pituitary hormones, the kind of hormones that are called pituitary hormones. We looked at the thyroid hormones, and we also saw parathyroid hormones. So in today's lesson, we shall continue from the pancreatic hormones, the adrenal hormones, and hormones of the reproductive organ. Let's take a look at the first one, pancreatic hormone. Pancreatic hormone, as the name implies, are secreted by the pancreas. The pancreas is an organ located in the abdomen. So you have your pancreas in your abdominal cavity. It is found right behind the stomach. So we can see the pancreas behind the stomach. This is the stomach in the abdominal cavity. And if you look closely, you see the pancreas lying behind the stomach. If you lift the stomach, you will find the pancreas very clear. The pancreas acts as an exocrine gland as well as an endocrine gland. Remember our lesson on exocrine gland? We said exocrine glands are glands that release their secretion into ducts or into channels. So as an exocrine gland, the pancreas secretes digestive enzymes. Remember that pancreatic juice that plays a role in digestion, it is secreted by the pancreas. So we can take a look at the ducts of the exocrine aspect of the pancreas. These are the exocrine ducts or exocrine part tissues in the pancreas. They secrete or release their secretion into these ducts, the exocrine ducts. The exocrine ducts release secretion into the main or central endocrine duct, and it is transported to the digestive system where it performs in its function. So there are different exocrine ducts, as you can see, all over the pancreas. There are certain cells that are scattered all over the pancreas that secrete or release secretions or secrete substances, but not into ducts. Those are the endocrine cells in the pancreas. So as an endocrine gland, the pancreas secretes hormones, of course, not into ducts. So let's take a look at what the endocrine cells in the pancreas. If you look around, you see some cells clustered around themselves. These are the cells that secrete hormones in the pancreas. These cells collectively form a tissue known as the islets of Langerhans. Islets of Langerhans is the tissue in the pancreas that secretes hormones. So it performs the endocrine function of the pancreas. Islets of Langerhans consist of different types of cells, 4 basic types of cells. They include beta cells, alpha cells, delta cells, and gamma cells. Remember, islets of Langerhans is scattered all over the pancreas. So this is what the islets of Langerhans will look like. We have them all over the pancreas. If you do a microscopic view of the islets, you find it in this form. So you see the different types of cells in the islets. We have the alpha cells, the ones in brown color. We have the beta cells, the ones in pale green color. You can see the delta cells as well as the gamma cells colored in blue. All of these cells in the islets of Langerhans secrete different types of pancreatic hormones. Examples of hormones secreted by the pancreas are insulin and glucagon. All of these different cells secrete different types of hormones. Examples of hormones secreted by these cells in the pancreas are insulin and glucagon. Insulin is secreted by the beta cells, while glucagon is secreted by the alpha cells. Insulin and glucagon are friends. We can call them friends. They work together. They have a common role, although they work in opposite direction. Insulin and glucagon work together to regulate the concentration of glucose in the blood. So these hormones are the culprits when it comes to high glucose concentration in the blood or low glucose concentration. While insulin decreases the concentration of glucose in the blood, glucagon increases the concentration of blood glucose. That's why I say they work in opposite direction, even though they are friends. One increases glucose concentration, the other decreases glucose concentration. So take a look at how these hormones carry out their function. The first is insulin. Remember, we said it is secreted by the beta cells of the pancreas. Insulin as a hormone helps to decrease the concentration of blood glucose by so many ways. This should tell you that insulin is usually secreted when the concentration of glucose or the level of glucose in the blood is higher than it should be. Sometimes it is secreted during meals or after meals. At that time, it is expected that the concentration of glucose in the blood should be higher than normal, especially after taking or after consuming a meal that is rich in carbohydrates. What does insulin do? How does it decrease or reduce the concentration of blood glucose? It does this by stimulating the absorption of glucose into the body tissues. Remember, glucose is utilized in the body for energy. The tissues of the body use glucose to generate energy. So insulin will cause all the tissues of the body to take up glucose from the blood and utilize them for energy. By doing this, it has reduced the level or the concentration of glucose in the blood. It can also take a different route by initiating the conversion of excess glucose in the blood into glycogen. Remember, glucose is stored in the body in the form of glycogen. Glucose is stored in the muscle cells and in the liver cells. It can also be stored in other cells of the body. So insulin initiates the conversion of blood glucose into glycogen, especially in the liver and in the muscles. So when glucose is withdrawn or when glucose is converted into glycogen, it means the blood glucose concentration is reduced. Insulin also performs another role in reducing the concentration of glucose in the blood. It prevents gluconeogenesis. Gluconeogenesis, especially in the liver. Do you remember what gluconeogenesis is? It is simply the production of glucose from non-sugar or non-carbohydrate molecules. Remember, in situations where the concentration of glucose in the blood is lower than it should be, say in times of prolonged fasting, in times of stress, or in any situation that could have led to the reduction of glucose concentration in the blood. Sometimes, other molecules, non-carbohydrate molecules in the body, can be broken down and converted into glucose. This process of breaking other non-carbohydrate molecules or converting other non-carbohydrate molecules into glucose is known as gluconeogenesis. By converting these molecules into glucose, the concentration of glucose in the blood will be increased. So during prolonged fasting, this mechanism helps to generate energy in the body, helps to provide glucose, which is used to generate energy in the body. But in this particular time where insulin is in action, the concentration of glucose in the blood is already higher than it should be, so we do not need gluconeogenesis. So insulin goes down to the liver, where gluconeogenesis usually takes place, and it prevents this process from occurring. And as it does this, it controls the concentration of glucose in the blood. One other function of insulin in reducing blood glucose level is converting glucose into fat. Let me also remind you that sometimes in the body, when the concentration of glucose is higher than it should be, some amount of this glucose is converted and stored as fatty tissues. So in a bid to reduce the concentration of glucose in the blood, insulin promotes the conversion of glucose into fatty tissues in the liver and all over the body. Insulin secretion may be abnormal. Sometimes it is secreted in excess, we call that over-secretion, and at other times it can be under-secreted. When insulin is over-secreted, as over-secretion of insulin, it will cause a great decrease in the concentration of glucose in the blood. And this is not so good for the blood. It will lead to a situation known as hypoglycemia. Imagine someone who does not have sufficient amount of glucose in his body. What do you think will happen? The person will be very weak, may not have enough energy to perform basic responsibilities or basic tasks. But the good thing here is that in such cases, other tissues in the body can easily be broken down and used for energy. When insulin is under-secreted, under-secretion of insulin in the body, it will lead to a great increase in blood glucose level. Remember, insulin helps to regulate and reduce the concentration of glucose in the blood. So when insulin is not secreted in sufficient amount, it means the concentration of glucose in the blood will be higher than it should be. This concentration could go so high and it will disturb the body system. It will lead to excessive excretion of glucose by the kidney. This is because the concentration of glucose in the blood is already so high. The kidney will have to excrete some of these glucose. This will lead to excessive or overworking of the kidney. The kidney will have to work in excess to help reduce or excrete some of this glucose through urine. This excretion or excessive excretion of glucose by the kidney is known as diabetes. And in this case, it is called diabetes mellitus. This is a condition, a disease condition that arises when there is under-secretion of insulin. A person suffering from diabetes mellitus tends to urinate frequently. This is because a large volume of glucose is being excreted from the blood by the kidney. And as the glucose is excreted, of course, a large volume of water will be excreted along with the glucose. This will result in frequent urination. And as you know, because the patient or the diabetic patient urinates frequently, large volume of water, large volume of glucose leaves the body, it will also lead to intense dehydration. So diabetic patients are easily dehydrated because they produce large volumes of urine. These large volumes of urine contain high amounts of glucose. So sometimes when a diabetic patient urinates in an environment, you tend to see ants or some sugar-loving insects going or clustering around that place. Diabetic patients also tend to experience unexplained weight loss, and they are often very weak and they are sluggish. They lose weight easily and they are sluggish. The unexplained weight loss seen in diabetic patients is a result of continual breakdown of fat and protein, which is used in place of glucose to generate energy in the body. Now think about it. The glucose in the blood is being excreted in excess out of the body. Glucose is not being stored. There is no insulin to stimulate the storage of glucose as glycogen, no insulin to cause the uptake of glucose by body tissues and utilized for energy. So the glucose is being excreted out of the body. This will result in the breakdown or the conversion of other non-carbohydrate molecules into source of energy, used as energy. So fatty tissues in the body will be broken down and used for energy. Proteins in the body will also be broken down and used for energy, and all of these molecules are usually in the muscles. So the breakdown of the muscle tissues to yield fats and proteins, which are used in place of glucose for energy, will result in weight loss. So tissues of the body will break down, and you discover that even though a person was on the big side, after some time of suffering from diabetes mellitus, the person will tend to lose weight. The sluggishness or the weakness experienced by diabetic patients is as a result of the breakdown of fat and protein from the muscle as well. Remember, the muscle is used to perform various activities. It gives strength, rigidity. It's part of the skeletal system of the human body. When fats and proteins are broken down from the muscle will become weak. So this will lead to muscle weakness or muscle wasting. Let's assume this is a person or this is a diabetic patient, and the patient was this way or had normal muscle buildup. After a while of suffering from diabetes mellitus, you could see that the person's muscle is now reduced, it has decreased. That is called muscle wasting or muscle weakness. All of this results from the breakdown of muscle tissues, fats and proteins in the muscle, which are utilized in place of glucose. Diabetic patients also experience some other complications. Sometimes, when diabetic patients sustain an injury, it does not matter how small that injury is. If that injury is not well managed, it could result in ulcer, diabetic ulcer. Sometimes diabetic ulcers do not heal easily, and they can prolong, and they can result in other issues, maybe a larger ulcer, and sometimes diabetic patients end up being amputated. That injury can lead to a very large ulcer that can result in the amputation of maybe a limb, maybe the leg or the hands or any other part of the body. The next hormone we shall be looking at, produced by the pancreas, is glucagon. Glucagon is produced by the alpha cells of the pancreatic islets. Glucagon, we said, increases the concentration of glucose in the blood. It does this by stimulating the conversion of stored glycogen into glucose. Remember, glucose has been stored in the body tissues as glycogen. In the liver and muscle cells, glucagon will break down the glycogen, the stored glycogen in the muscle and in the liver cells into glucose, and glucose will be utilized for energy. Glucagon promotes glycogenolysis. Glycogenolysis is simply the conversion of stored glycogen into glucose. It also stimulates gluconeogenesis. Gluconeogenesis, as I said earlier, the production or the conversion of non-carbohydrate molecules in the body into glucose, which is used for energy. When do you think glucagon will be secreted in the body? It will be secreted when the concentration of glucose in the blood is lower than it should be. Glucagon will come into action and cause the blood glucose concentration to increase. It performs several other roles in the body. The next group of hormones we shall be looking at are the adrenal hormones. Adrenal hormones are secreted by the adrenal gland or adrenal glands. The adrenal glands are two pyramid-shaped glands that are attached to the kidneys. They are somewhat close to the pancreas. You can see the pancreas lying behind the stomach and in front of the kidneys. Then we have the kidney is directly behind the pancreas. On top of each kidney is the adrenal gland. So we can see the adrenal gland on each kidney. It means we have 2 adrenal glands. The adrenal gland is divided into 2 parts. Each adrenal gland consists of 2 parts. We have the inner layer and the outer layer. The inner layer is called adrenal medulla and the outer layer is called adrenal cortex. Each of these layers, the adrenal cortex and the adrenal medulla, produce or secrete different types of adrenal hormones. The outer layer, which is the adrenal cortex, secretes adrenal cortex hormones, while the inner layer secretes adrenal medulla hormones. I would also like to mention here that the adrenal gland also secretes little amounts of sex hormones. In this case, it is often the male sex hormones, which eventually is converted to testosterone, which is a primary male sex hormone. What does the adrenal cortex hormone do in the body? The adrenal cortex hormones are generally called corticosteroids. They are steroids. They are steroids because they are made from cholesterol. They contain the chemical structure of their corticosteroids are made up of cholesterol. The secretion of corticosteroids, that's hormones of the adrenal cortex, are regulated by adrenocorticotropic hormone. Remember this hormone? We learned about it when we were looking at the hormone secreted by the anterior pituitary gland. We said the adrenocorticotropic hormone, which is ACTH, regulates the secretion of adrenal cortex hormones. Corticosteroids are classified into 2 groups. We have the glucocorticoids and the mineralocorticoids. Let's take a look at the first group, glucocorticoids. Glucocorticoids are adrenal cortex hormones that stimulate the metabolism of glucose. As the name implies, glucocorticoids stimulate metabolism of glucose. They produce glucose from non-carbohydrate molecules. That means they promote gluconeogenesis. They produce glucose from non-sugar molecules such as fatty acids and amino acid. Glucocorticoid is often secreted when the blood glucose level is lower than it should be. Secreted in stressful conditions such as seen in times of prolonged fast, in times of rigorous or intense exercise, in times of shock, or any other time or any other condition that would result in decreased concentration of blood glucose. There are different types of glucocorticoids. There are different hormones that are categorized or placed in this category. They include cortisol and cortisone. The most common example of glucocorticoid is the cortisone. We can see the cortisone or cortisol coming into play. When cortisol is secreted from the adrenal cortex, it goes down to the muscles of the body, it goes down to the liver, it gets to the pancreas, it can go to the brain, all over the body, trying to cause increase in blood glucose concentration. The second group of adrenal cortex hormone is the mineralocorticoids. Mineralocorticoids regulate the concentration of minerals. They regulate the metabolism of salts in the body. They help to balance the concentration of minerals, concentration of salt in the body to keep the body system stable. Mineralocorticoids regulate minerals such as potassium and sodium. A good example or a common example of mineralocorticoid is aldosterone. Aldosterone is responsible for the regulation of the concentration of sodium primarily. As it does this, it also helps to excrete potassium from the blood. Aldosterone helps or stimulates increased reabsorption of sodium from the blood. It does this at the kidney. Remember the kidney tubules? where certain minerals are absorbed or reabsorbed from the urine and certain minerals are allowed to be excreted with the urine. Aldosterone is stimulated when the concentration of sodium in the blood is lower than it should be. Aldosterone comes into play and it stimulates reabsorption of sodium from the kidney tubules. It also promotes the excretion of potassium. As sodium is reabsorbed from the urine by the kidney tubules, potassium is given in exchange for sodium. So more sodium is reabsorbed, more potassium is excreted. Why is sodium important in the body? Why is aldosterone important in the body? The amount of sodium present in the blood is very important because it helps to control blood volume and it also helps to regulate blood pressure. So aldosterone performs its action in order to ensure that the body functions properly. If sodium is retained in the blood, if adequate amount of sodium is retained in the blood or in the body, it will help to increase or stabilize blood volume. And if the blood volume is stabilized, of course, the blood pressure will also be stable. So by doing all of these things, aldosterone helps to maintain and stabilize the internal environment. Let's look at the next group of adrenal hormones. Hormones secreted by the adrenal medulla, the inner cells of the adrenal. They include adrenaline and noradrenaline. This group of hormones are very interesting sets of hormones. They are very interesting. They play a lot of roles in our bodies daily. Adrenaline and noradrenaline are often regarded as emergency hormone. Remember those times when you are moody, when you were scared, when you were excited, when you were afraid of something, you were so afraid, or any other time where you were pushed to maybe have a fight, a quarrel, you were angry. All of those moments and those feelings are regulated by these two hormones, noradrenaline and adrenaline. They are secreted in times of emergency, in times of that anger, that outburst of excitement or whatever it is. These hormones come into play. They help to prepare our bodies in response to immediate or emergency situations such as fear, excitement. All of these things happen suddenly. They just come in times of shock. At times when you're about to take part in a fight, maybe in a quarrel, somebody pushes you, you want to respond, that's not too good. Or any other time when your body is required to move into action immediately. Adrenaline and noradrenaline comes into play. What do they do in the body? They stimulate various organs and tissues of the body into rapid response. And by rapid response, the body receives enough or adequate energy to withstand all of these processes. So they help the body to respond to these situations with good or sufficient amount of strength. Adrenaline and noradrenaline are also regarded as the flight-fight hormones. Some people regard it as the fear, flight, and fight hormones because these hormones are always in the body or they are always in play whenever we are afraid, whenever we are moved to run in times of flight, or whenever we are involved in fights. They cause the following reactions in the body or following effects. When adrenaline is secreted in the body, they increase heart rates, they increase blood pressure, and they also cause increase in metabolic rates. Think of it a little. Remember those times when you were angry or when you were afraid, your heart was beating faster, isn't it? At that time when your heart was beating faster, the blood or your blood pressure also increased. At the same time, the metabolic processes in your body, more glucose is produced to generate energy. If it's a fight, so you have enough energy to withstand the fight, whatever it is, the body will have enough strength to withstand it. So it causes these three effects amongst other effects. Increases heart rate, blood pressure, and metabolic rates. As soon as the stimulus, whatever may have caused the anger or the fight, or the quarrel or the excitement is removed. Say those times after your friends have spoken to you and they try to calm you down and you're not calm, the hormone, be it adrenaline or noradrenaline, are quickly removed from the body. They are deactivated from the body by the liver, and the body processes return to normal. Remember, it is not good for your blood pressure to be high for a long period of time or for your heart rate to be high for so long. So they are removed from the body and the body system begins to work normally and operate normally. The last group of hormones we shall be looking at in today's class are the hormones of the reproductive organs. The hormones of the reproductive organ are also very interesting. So the reproductive organs in humans secrete certain group of hormones that are regarded as sex hormones. These hormones are secreted in males as well as in females. Sex hormones are responsible for all of the processes in reproduction. Sex hormones produced in male are produced by the testes, and those in females are produced by the ovaries and a little by the uterus. Sex hormones play a lot of roles in the bodies of males and females in preparation for reproduction and during reproduction. They are often produced at puberty. That's the production or the secretion of sex hormones begins at puberty and it continues into adulthood. Let me also mention here that the general endocrine system, as we discussed in the 5th part of this lesson, is regulated by the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus acts as a connection between the nervous system, that's the brain, and the endocrine system. It does this by regulating the activities of the pituitary gland, which is close to the hypothalamus. Remember, the pituitary gland regulates the activities of every other endocrine gland. So back to our sex hormones. Let's take a look at the male sex hormones. We said it is secreted by the testes. The testis is one of the reproductive glands that is attached to the penis. We can see the testis, which is usually contained in the scrotal sac, in the scrotum. The testis in the scrotum secretes the sex or the male sex hormone. The male sex hormone is known as testosterone. This is the basic or the primary male sex hormone secreted by the testes. Testosterone, the name follows the organ testis, help to stimulate or help to influence sexual behavior in sexually mature males. It helps to promote sexual mood or sexual urge in males. Testosterone also stimulates the development and the growth of reproductive organs such as the testis itself. So as soon as testosterone begins to be secreted in the body, it goes down to the testis to stimulate or promote the further development of the testis. It develops or stimulates the development of the penis, and it also stimulates development of other accessory reproductive organs. It is also responsible for the development of male secondary sexual characteristics. Remember those characteristics that occur or that come up in the bodies of males after puberty? Sexual characteristics such as broad voice. The voice of male becomes very broad. That's as a result of the effect of testosterone. It also promotes the growth of beards, as we can see, which is a secondary sexual characteristics. It promotes the growth of pubic hairs, and it also promotes the growth of hair on the chest of male. It also promotes growth or the proper development of the male physique. You know, the broad body shape of males. Testosterone performs those actions. How about the female sex hormones? Female sex hormones include estrogen and progesterone. They are produced or secreted by the ovaries. Remember the ovaries? In the pelvic region of the female body. A little of this hormone, especially the estrogen, is secreted by the uterus. The uterus is the womb in the female body. Estrogen and progesterone help to regulate sexual behaviors in females. They are responsible for sexual urge and sexual mood in females. They also stimulate the development of female secondary sexual characteristics, such as the development of breasts after puberty. If you take a look at this picture, this is a young girl before puberty. After puberty, estrogen and progesterone are responsible for the development of breasts. They are also responsible for the development of the widening of the hip. They are responsible for the enlargement of the breast as an adolescent continues to grow, or as a young adult continues to grow. They also help in the development of pubic hairs in the bodies of females, and they help in the proper development of the female physique. All of these are performed by the female sex hormones. Estrogen and progesterone also help to regulate the reproductive cycle, that is the menstrual cycle in females. These are some examples or some roles that are performed by the female sex hormones. Let me also mention here that apart from estrogen and progesterone, the bodies of females also have a little of the male sex hormone, testosterone. Remember testosterone? Testosterone is often or generally regarded as a male sex hormone, but the bodies of females, especially the ovaries in the reproductive system, secrete a little testosterone. The adrenal gland in the bodies of females also secrete a little testosterone. This testosterone secretion is under normal regulation, so it doesn't cause all of those effects which it causes in the bodies of males in the bodies of females. It can only cause those effects if its secretion is higher than what it should be. Okay, we have come to the end of today's class, but before we end the class, we have to take our summary. We said the pancreas is both an exocrine gland as well as an endocrine gland. It secretes different types of hormones, which include insulin and glucagon. And we said insulin, when it's under-secreted, will result in a condition known as diabetes mellitus. We also saw the adrenal gland. We said the adrenal gland consists of two parts. It has the adrenal cortex, the outer part, and the adrenal medulla. The adrenal cortex secretes corticosteroids, while adrenal medulla secretes adrenaline and noradrenaline. Some hormones of the reproductive organ, that's sex hormones, include testosterone in the bodies of males and a little testosterone which is secreted in the bodies of females. Then we have estrogen and progesterone secreted in females. Those are the female sex hormones. I'd like to find out if you learned something from today's class. And to do this, we'll take this question. Which of these hormones regulates the amount of glucose present in the blood? There are so many hormones responsible for this. Let's find out. A, estrogen. B, aldosterone. And C, insulin. The correct answer to this question is option C, insulin. It decreases the concentration of glucose in the blood. Okay, we have come to the end of today's class. I hope to see you in our next class where we shall continue on other lessons. Until then, bye.